vivid verses.
18 years of high-level quantitative analysis, and he has successfully calculated himself into a dead end. Those were the precise syllables Leanna chose to broadcast at our anniversary gala, projected toward 42 guests gathered in our glass-walled Zurich penthouse to celebrate a milestone I had, until that moment, categorized as a stable asset. I was standing near the Marble Island, a glass of 18-year Highland Park in my hand, discussing the impact of Baltic trade fluctuations on the Eurozone with her brother, when Leanna decided to pivot the evening's trajectory toward my public liquidation. The discourse had drifted toward venture capital and the courage of the founder, and I observed the precise moment her pupils dilated, a physiological marker of predatory intent. She adjusted the strap of her bespoke silk gown, her eyes sweeping the room to ensure she had a captive audience. "Oh, please," she remarked, her voice carrying across the open floor plan with practiced ease. "Look at Lennon. 18 years in the same firm, the same division, the same risk assessment models. He enters the building at 7:15, consumes exactly 4 ounces of seared ahi tuna for lunch, and returns at 6:45 like an atomic clock. The ambient noise in the room dropped by approximately 15 decibels. Saffron, her closest confidant, attempted a tactical diversion about the catering, but Leanna's momentum was already at terminal velocity. I suggest disruption. I suggest equity-heavy startups. I suggest the volatility of innovation, but no. He is physiologically addicted to the median. She paused, timing the silence for maximum theatrical resonance. 18 years of calculating margins, and he's still in the same corner office. He will never be a disruptor. He is the personification of a bond. Low yield, no excitement, just there. A wave of dissonant, nervous laughter rippled through the gallery. My internal sensors cataloged the reactions with the speed of a high-frequency trading algorithm. Her colleagues from the art gallery offered performative smirks, identifying with her suffering. Her brother, a man who relied on my tax-advantaged gift strategy for his children's education, focused intently on the ice in his glass. Her mother tightened her jaw, giving me a curt nod that signaled her agreement with the assessment. I remained stochastically neutral. I did not blink excessively. I did not feel the surge of cortisol that typically accompanies social humiliation. I simply took a measured sip of scotch, cataloging the peat and vanilla notes, and allowed her to finalize her thesis. We could have commanded a far more aggressive portfolio by now if he possessed a shred of tactical ambition, she continued, her flute of vintage Krug sparkling under the LED chandeliers. Consider the Sterling Vaughns. She gestured toward the skyline, toward neighbors who weren't present. He burned through 4 tech firms. The 5th achieved a unicorn valuation. That requires a high-risk appetite. This one, she indicated me again with a dismissive flick of her wrist. This one prioritizes the floor over the ceiling. He doesn't understand that to win big, you have to be willing to lose everything. The room was suffocatingly quiet now. Leanna, a guest, tried to mitigate the damage. Perhaps we should pivot to the travel plans for the upcoming winter. No, it's a valid observation, Leanna countered, her gaze locking onto mine. He recognizes the data points. Don't you, Lennon? You're a man of logic. You know I'm right about your limitations. I placed my glass on the granite with 0 acoustic impact. I did not defend my career or point out that my boring models had protected our assets during 3 global market corrections. To do so would be to accept her frame, the idea that my worth was a subject for debate. Your assessment of a situation is numerically accurate, I said, my voice steady and low. Pivot points are essential when a system becomes stagnant. She flashed a smile of perceived dominance, turning back to the crowd. See, even he acknowledges the deficit. But I was mid-calculation. I was looking at her and seeing not a wife, but a liability whose volatility had finally exceeded her utility. The critical factor, I continued, though she had already begun to turn away, is identifying the exact moment a partnership ceases to provide a return on investment and having the clinical resolve to divest, even if that divestment occurs after 18 years of capital contribution. The underlying implication bypassed Leanna. She was currently intoxicated by the social capital she believed she had just gained, but I noticed three of the more astute guests shift their weight uncomfortably. They recognized the coldness of my tone, the lack of anger that signals a final decision. She laughed, oblivious, and toasted to evolution. The gala persisted for another 120 minutes. I functioned as the perfect host, replenishing drinks and discussing macroeconomics as if the preceding minutes had never occurred. I watched Leanna move through the room, her laughter becoming louder, her criticisms more frequent. When an associate mentioned a recent acquisition, she noted, "It must be exhilarating to associate with men who actually seek the hunt." When the topic of our retreat in the Alps arose, she mentioned how my preference for the same chalet was symptomatic of a static soul. I processed these inputs with a profound sense of clinical detachment. After 18 years, I was finally observing the true architecture of her character. She was a social climber who had been auditing our life and found my stability to be a personal affront. The public display wasn't the catalyst. It was merely the final data point required to complete the pattern. I calculated the number of times she had likely mocked my predictability to her circle while simultaneously spending the dividends that predictability provided. My internal monologue was a series of if-then statements. If she views my stability as a limitation, then she has no claim to the security it provides. If she seeks volatility, then I will provide a total systemic shock. By 1 a.m., the final luxury vehicles were being summoned. The farewells were punctuated by the pitying glances one might give a redundant employee. "That was an optimal social showing," she said, unzipping her bespoke evening gown in the master suite. The optics were excellent. I was systematically placing the crystal glasses into the high-temp wash cycle. The data revealed a great deal. She failed to register the subtext. "I'm depleted. I'm retiring for the night." She paused at the threshold of the dressing room. "Ensure the smart lighting is calibrated to 5% when you're done. I know how you demand your environmental variables to be perfect." A final, sharp-edged jibe. "Rest well," I said. "I will ensure everything is in its correct place." She ascended to the bedroom, entirely unaware that she had just presided over the final dividend payment of our marriage. I finished the kitchen, deactivated the security sensors for the terrace, and retreated to my study. I opened my encrypted terminal. I sat in the ergonomic silence until dawn, not with anger, which is an inefficient expenditure of energy, but with absolute focus. I drafted a memo. It was a formal dissolution of my current professional contract at the firm. I had enough in private holdings to never work again, and the firm's non-compete clause was expiring. After 18 years of risk management, I am exercising my exit clause, effective immediately. Next, I accessed our unified ledger. 18 years of joint accumulation. The irony was palpable. My boring tenure in risk management had built the $12.4 million net worth she used to fund her art acquisitions. The steady growth she despised was the very oxygen of her vanity. I began the process of reallocating liquid assets to protected holding accounts, not a theft, but a defensive positioning of the principle I had brought into the marriage versus the gains. I felt a profound sense of equilibrium. No adrenaline, just the calm of a solved equation. By 5:30 a.m., I had a confirmation from a top-tier litigator. I designed a simple, high-impact card on my professional press. Front, strategic independence consultant, valuing stability as the ultimate leverage. Back, my secure contact info and the phrase, now vetting partners who understand the value of a solid foundation. At 6:15 a.m., she remained unconscious. I showered, donned a charcoal bespoke suit, and consumed a high-protein breakfast. I departed at 7:15, as I always did. However, I left the resignation memo on Leanna's vanity, resting atop her smartphone. I placed one of the new cards inside the envelope. The drive to my temporary office space felt mathematically different. During my lunch hour, I met the litigator. Your documentation is surgically precise, he noted, reviewing the spreadsheets. You've even accounted for the depreciation on our gallery's inventory. Precision is my primary function, I replied. I want a clean break. No emotional negotiation, just a structural division of assets based on contribution and conduct. He smiled. The boring traits usually win the largest settlements. She won't know what hit her. I returned to the penthouse at 6:45 p.m. Her Tesla was in the charging bay. The interior lights were set to a harsh, panicked frequency. I could hear her voice from the foyer, shrill and uncoordinated. She'd had 10 hours to process the data. I entered the living room at exactly 6:50. She was pacing the Italian tile, the memo crumpled in her manicured hand. Is this a mental breakdown? Is this some sort of midlife protest? Her voice had that forced high pitch used by those losing their grip on a narrative. I placed my briefcase on the bench. It is a strategic realignment. You expressed a desire for a man of action and disruption. I am providing you with a significant market shock. She brandished the business card. And this strategic independence nonsense? You're quitting your job? Our income? Our standing? You identified a lack of ambition in my previous role. I have taken that feedback and applied it to my personal life. I am seeking a partnership with a higher growth potential and a more respectful corporate culture. Since I am boring and predictable, I've predictably ensured that my future is secure. Yours, however, is now subject to the volatility you so admire. She stared as if I were a malfunctioning piece of software. I was drinking Krug, Lennon. It was a party. Everyone pokes fun at their spouse. It's a social lubricant. You're being hypersensitive. Correction. Teasing is a mutual exchange. Publicly devaluing your primary partner's life work is a breach of fiduciary trust. I'm not being sensitive. I am being responsive to the data. You have signaled repeatedly and publicly that you do not value this partnership. I am simply closing the account. Her phone vibrated. She glanced at it, her expression shifting from anger to genuine fear. Who did you email? Saffron just asked me if I needed a place to stay. She said you sent out a mass update to our gala list. I adjusted my cuffs. Information moves efficiently in a well-connected network. I sent a courtesy note to our guests thanking them for attending the final celebration of our marriage. I felt it was important to clarify the disruption you were so eager for. She slumped onto the designer sofa. This is irrational. We have 18 years of history. You don't liquidate a marriage because of a few sentences at a gala. A few sentences? I stood perfectly still, my frame unyielding. Last quarter, you told the gallery board I was risk-averse to a fault. Last month, you told your trainer I was mathematically incapable of passion. Last night, you turned me into a cautionary tale for 42 people. These are not outliers. They are a trend line. And the trend line is heading toward my total erasure for your amusement. I am simply mitigating the loss before the damage becomes irreversible. I was frustrated. You're so predictable, it drives me insane. I wanted you to fight back, to show some fire. You mistook composure for weakness, I said. And yet, you never found my salary or the security of this penthouse to be insane. You enjoyed the fruits of a labor while mocking the tree. That is a parasitic relationship, not a partnership. My phone chirped. A message from the firm. I must attend to this. It's a matter of asset protection. Don't you walk away from me, she yelled, but I was already in the study. The call confirmed the freezing of the primary joint account, pending legal review. When I emerged, she was staring at the business card again. You actually had these printed. You planned this. I believe in professional branding. If I am to be ambitious, I should start with my own liberation. Stop talking like a consultant. This is our life. A life built on a foundation of mutual respect. Since that foundation has crumbled, the structure is no longer habitable. I walked to the safe and removed my passport. I have secured a suite at the Dolder Grand for the next month. My legal team will reach out to yours by 9 a.m. tomorrow. You can't just leave. I paused at the door. Observe the physics of the situation. I am currently mobile, and you are stationary. The departure is already in progress. The next few weeks were a masterclass in tactical isolation. I moved into a high-end corporate suite and deactivated all social media. I blocked her number and diverted all incoming digital traffic to a legal folder. Over the next 14 days, Leanna sent 34 emails. I analyzed each one for tactical shifts. They followed a predictable pattern. Phase 1, denial and gaslighting. You're overreacting to a joke. Phase 2, anger. You're a cold-blooded monster for doing this to me. Phase 3, bargaining. I've booked us a retreat in the Maldives. We can fix this. Phase 4, victimhood. I'm scared and I don't know how to pay the maintenance fees on the gallery. I replied to none. I was busy finalizing the partition of our assets. I spent my days in the quiet offices of my lawyers, systematically documenting every financial contribution I had made. We discovered that Leanna had been borrowing from our joint investment account to cover the gallery's losses for the past 3 years, losses she had hidden from me. She's been hemorrhaging capital while mocking your boring stability, my lawyer noted. The irony is almost poetic. It's not poetic, I corrected. It's a breach of contract. The real shift occurred 4 weeks into the separation. I returned to the penthouse with a professional moving crew to collect my remaining personal effects. She was waiting in the kitchen, her eyes showing the first signs of genuine realization. The penthouse was messy, an anomaly in our 18-year history. She was wearing a robe, her hair unbrushed. I've spoken to a therapist, she began, her voice trembling. They say I have a defensive mechanism that uses humor to deflect my own insecurities about my gallery's failure. I was projecting my frustration with my own career onto you. I observed her micro-expressions, the downward tilt of the mouth, the forced dampness in the eyes. An interesting hypothesis, I said, supervising the packing of my library. However, the motive is irrelevant to the outcome. You chose to use your husband as a public sacrificial lamb to bolster your own ego. The damage to the brand is permanent. I'm trying to apologize, Lennon. I'm being vulnerable. I stopped and looked at her. My frame was absolute. No, you're trying to mitigate a loss. You were vulnerable because the boring guy took the checkbook with him. If I had stayed, you would still be making those jokes today. You are only sorry because the predictable man did the most unpredictable thing possible. He stopped caring about your opinion. That's not true. I value you. I need you. You need my boring reliability. You do not value me. If you did, Saffron's husband wouldn't have called me to apologize for not standing up for me at the party. If you did, the Sterling Vaughns wouldn't have sent a note saying they found your behavior unconscionable. If you did, your own brother wouldn't have told me he understands why I'm leaving. She turned pale. They said that. My brother said that. People admire stability until they see it being abused. then they fear the person doing the abusing because they know that if you can do that to your partner of 18 years, you can do it to anyone. You haven't just lost a husband, Leanna. You've lost your social standing. That is the risk you took. The fight drained out of her. For the first time, she saw the reality she had created. I didn't think people saw me as a bully. I thought I was the fun one. You thought they saw you as the clever, sophisticated woman with a boring husband. You miscalculated the room. You forgot that in our circle, everyone knows who actually manages the risk. I signaled the movers to take the final crates. So this is it. 18 years, ended by one night of Krug and bad jokes. Ended by 18 years of silent contempt that finally found a microphone. The party was just the day to release. I walked to the door. For what it's worth, Leanna, the boring guy, was the only thing standing between you and the volatility of the real world. I hope you enjoy the risk you were so eager for. You are now officially disrupted. The following 6 months were a fascinating study in group dynamics. Most of the innovators she admired disappeared when she could no longer host 5-course galas. Her friends found her presence a reminder of their own social vulnerabilities. The divorce was finalized with surgical efficiency. I retained 65% of the non-liquid assets due to her documented depletion of joint funds and the specific structure of our prenuptial agreement. She was forced to sell her gallery's shares to maintain a semblance of her former lifestyle. I watched her from a distance, or rather, I watched the data. She moved into a smaller apartment in a less prestigious district. She began taking freelance consulting work that she once would have scoffed at. She tried dating, but the report from our mutual circles were always the same. She couldn't stop complaining about her cold ex-husband, which, as it turns out, is a significant deterrent to high-value partners. I conversely was thriving. I had launched my independent consultancy, and the market for boring, predictable, and highly accurate risk assessment was at an all-time high. I spent my weekends hiking the Jutleiberg or reading in my new, smaller, but perfectly organized apartment. The silence was not empty. It was optimized. I met someone 8 months later, Claire, a senior researcher at a maritime institute. She is a woman who values the structural integrity of a ship over the aesthetic of its sails. We met at a lecture on climate modeling. "You're remarkably composed," she said during our 4th dinner at a quiet, high-end bistro. "I've seen men in your position who are frantic to prove they're still in the game after a divorce." "I was never out of the game," I replied. "I simply changed the rules of the engagement." "Does my composure lack the disruptive energy you look for in a partner?" She laughed, a genuine, warm sound. "Quite the opposite. In my field, if something is exciting, it usually means it's breaking or about to explode. I prefer things that work exactly as they're supposed to. Reliability is the most underrated form of genius. We have been together for a year now. She has never once used me as a punchline. She views my predictability as a form of high-level competence. When I pack my lunch or stick to my gym routine, she doesn't see a static soul. She sees a man who understands the power of discipline. She understands that the person who handles the logistics is the one who truly owns the future. Last week, I encountered Leanna at a charity event I couldn't avoid. She looked strained, her clothing from a 3-season-old collection, her smile brittle. "You look successful," she said, her eyes scanning Claire, who was discussing ocean floor topography with a donor. "I'm operating at peak efficiency," I said. "I hear you've taken a position as a junior consultant for an auction house. How is the disruption treating you?" "It's a start. It's high risk." She looked at me, a lingering desperation in her eyes, a hope that she could still trigger a reaction in me. "Are you happy with her?" "The researcher?" "I am," I replied calmly. "She doesn't require me to be anyone else for her to feel significant. It's a much more sustainable model. She values the floor as much as the ceiling. I really did love you, Lennon. In my way, I studied her for a moment, seeing the manipulative intent beneath the words. She wanted me to plead, to say I missed her, to offer her a way back into the security she had mocked. Your way had a high cost of maintenance and a low rate of return, I said. I moved into a more stable market. I suggest you do the same. I walked away. As I rejoined Claire, she squeezed my hand. Everything okay? Perfectly, I said. Just a final audit of an old account. The boring man with a predictable routine had executed the most aggressive takeover in his history. I had liquidated a toxic asset and reinvested in my own peace. It turned out I had plenty of ambition. I just needed to be the CEO of my own life. I realized that the greatest risk isn't staying the same. It's staying with someone who hates you for it. I had calculated my way to freedom, and the yield was infinite.
Thanks for listening.